And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Tyler Tivador, podcast host, professional speaker, and musician who's had a few near-death experiences, which we're going to learn about today and more. Tyler, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me. Been watching the show, hearing about it a lot for quite a while, and then I've been really watching it lately, so I'm a fan, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for watching, and now thank you for being a part of it.
Absolutely, full circle. Love it.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you don't mind, let's start chronologically and tell us about your first near-death experience.
So, I guess we'll go back. I preface this story by saying, of course, a lot of this sounds a little bit unbelievable. Some of these things sound a little bit unbelievable, and a lot of people live unbelievable lives, extraordinary and sometimes unbelievable lives. And, I've always followed a quote and summed up my life by the quote that, you see more from the edge than you do from the center. And I've definitely lived that life. The first time that, I was actually told by doctors, during a trauma incident when I was 15 years old. I was attacked. It was a smaller town, when I was young, and I'm not ashamed to admit this because at this point it's testimony, not tribulation. It's not a plan anymore. It's decades ago. I was involved in some criminal activity as a young person. I kind of came from a little bit of a rough upbringing. Not awful, so I don't mean to complain or anything, just an area where there was some opportunity for that. And I was young and silly, kind of stupid at times. And, I ended up getting involved with some pretty serious people in my, mid-teens. And I was attacked one day. And I remember the months leading up to it, there was an incident involving, police and, people at that age. They try to make names for themselves. It's kind of they're young, and we were young. We were looking for ways to, make names for ourselves and climb that ladder. Not necessarily myself, but a lot of people were. And, just basically an opportunity to kind of do that. It's a step on each other to get to the top type of situation. And this actually really changed my life a lot, even though I was quite young at the time, because this is when, I kind of transitioned into the next phase of my life, which was being a musician by not just hobby, but by trade. But yeah, I was attacked, by a few people from behind. And, well, actually, I got an example right now because I fell recently. So I have a scar right here, which is only from 3 weeks ago. So this is going to get better. But I got attacked from behind, and I had a cut going from about here all the way to here. Split my skull open. I was on the ground unconscious. I woke up, I guess, from what I'm, told and what the paperwork and all that kind of says. There's camera footage and police footage, police reports and all that kind of thing, which is pretty social media, by the way. I'm very thankful for. 30 to 45 minutes I was unconscious for, which to me felt like both a lifetime and both a moment and a lifetime all in the same. Very much. I mean, I hate to liken it to something like this, but I've ritualistically and spiritually done, some psychedelic journeys via, ayahuasca and things like that with shaman, not talking as a hobbyist. That's not what I'm endorsing. But that's the only other time that I can say, something felt like a moment and a lifetime all at the same time. Is a death and a truly spiritual or psychedelic experience. There's no differentiating between the two. You don't need to have psychedelics to have a spiritual experience. It's just, of course, something people might be familiar with. Yeah, I remember waking up on the ground, looking to my left and right and seeing nothing but, there's a lot of blood coming from my head. And, it was being worked on, and I asked if I was going to die. They wouldn't answer my question. Occasionally one of them would say something like they're trying, etc. And, it would go in and out. And there was a weird piece with it. I remember thinking, there's a few things that I remember that were earthly. I remember thinking about my shoe, these silly things. I remember thinking about my shoes and wondering if they had blood on them, and very quickly dismissing that thought. I remember thinking, I wonder if so and so saw this, but not for the reasons that I would have, thought, not jealousy or not revengeful or anything like that. It was, and I've heard this example made before, but this first time, and this is something that I want to note, is the few times that I've had brushes with the other side through the veil, they've always had the same theme. And it sounds a little bit simplified, but it's always seemed to be something like if you've ever been underwater, holding your breath for a really, really long time, not just underwater for 10 seconds, but under your, you're really pushing your limits. You bet your buddy couldn't hold your, maybe you're 8 years old and your buddy told you to try to hold your breath for 60 seconds. You're really trying. That's the theme of the few times that I've had the brush with the other side, is that's kind of what it felt like in a nutshell. Like we're holding our breath for a very long time under a world that's underwater that we can't really see a whole lot. I can't open my mouth and breathe when I'm underwater personally. I can't go to the store. I can't interact with my loved ones. I can walk around and float around for about 60 seconds and kind of see if I really want to open my eyes and hurt them. But everything gets a lot easier when I get up above the water. And so a couple of things I learned from just right away that first time was, I honestly, I developed, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but I developed less of a fear of death because what to me, my first brush with death at the age of, 15 years old was something beautiful to me. It felt like there was relief on the other side, and not in a way that I wanted to die, not in a way that I wanted to cross over, in a way that I knew and I had a sense of, I wasn't raised very religious or anything in a religious family or anything like that. It's not that I wasn't interested in God or the concept of God. It just wasn't something that was forced on me in my life. Like some people have, that structure in their upbringing. Some people don't. It is what it is. We're all different. Um, that looking back, of course, now that really set me down that path of lifetime learning and seeking that process. Even when I went away for a little while, away from it. I mean, I would always come back to seeking spirituality, to seeking self, to seeking things like what is the other side, things like that. And I mean, that's helped me a lot. The other thing it taught me, which I've since, come to a little bit more peace with, and I think unlearn a little bit, was unfortunately, I mean, a lot of people watched this happen and nobody did anything to stop it. So it did make me a little bit reclusive, a little bit distrustful of people at the time. I became very defensive, very weary of people because, this was something where, I mean, if three people attack one person and there's 200 people watching, somebody could have stopped it. We all know this. Now, I always say it's great we didn't have those phones and stuff yet. This is probably, what is this, 2006, 2007, something like that. So we were just right on that cusp of sharing everything on, on Facebook and things like that. I think we were still using MySpace a little bit at that time. Um, but yeah, a lot of people really watched that happen, and there was a side taking of sorts at the time, which came to help me later in life because a lot of these people came in. I mean, I didn't have anger towards them. It taught me to forgive, but a lot of people came to me later with what they had expressed as really tremendous guilt for even being there, being associated, not saying anything, not doing anything. Um, Later taught me a little bit about forgiveness and the beauty of people, even ones that I maybe once thought ill of. So it kind of came full circle through multiple experiences of that sort, which we can touch on certainly. But that was the first time, which I think kind of set me up for a life of risk, really being open to risk, calculated risk. But I always calculated that risk, I think, a little bit different than most people did because things have always been pretty interesting, to say the least. Um, but yeah, I guess not to be too reckless, but I then, I'm 15 or 16 years old, and I'm on a path of understanding myself because I don't trust those around me, and then I'm also not really afraid of the other side because not because I think it's beautiful, and that kind of set up my adolescence and my young life.
Well, you're saying that it's beautiful on the other side. Did you go out of body and see things? And if so, what did you see?
Yes. And every time I've came close to, I mean, I say that like 15 times, I can think of 3 times where I was quite close to that situation, medically speaking, in the physical sense of the word. Every single time when I say beautiful, and what I see is always something to the effect of, to use it, I'll speak in metaphor. I'm from Florida, so we have beautiful beaches. We have, snorkeling, scuba diving, all boating, all that kind of stuff. You go underwater and you put the snorkel mask on, and you can see a little certain small section of, maybe you look at a dock and you see certain types of fish, and you see a certain little reef over here. And that's cool, but you're starting to run out of breath and you're starting to get tired. And that's a lot like life. We go through life and there's things that excite us, and we see a fish, and we see a coral reef. But ultimately, I mean, nobody lives forever. We get to be 70, 80, 90 years old, and we get tired, and we have to come up above that water. And, we don't want to. We're afraid of it. Nobody's looking forward and going, I can't wait to be 90 years old so I can see the other side. Like, I don't know anybody who thinks and speaks like that. Just that's not the natural human tendency. But what I've seen is a very wide perspective, compared to what one might see in this metaphor is the small coral reef over there, and the school of fish over there. It's almost as if, you know you you actually you finally get to take those goggles off. You finally get to take the snorkel off. You don't need any of that stuff to breathe. And what's up above, it's so much. I liken it to, like the light spectrum. We can only see such a small part of it, but we know there's much more, spectrum of light, even, from radiation all the way to radio waves that we're not seeing. We're seeing visible light, kind of like that. It's like looking at a small section of a coral reef and coming up above and seeing that you're in a massive, astounding, beautiful blue lagoon filled with diverse wildlife, where you're not trying to hold in your breath so you don't breathe into dangerous water around you. You're just breathing in the clean air around you and appreciating what you're standing in. And the other thing that's notable is which has always been influential to me, is the concept of time in these states. The time and the relationship to the body. There's no relationship to the body when you have these experiences, and a lot of people will kind of confirm this. There is no relationship to the body. That goes out the window for the time being. It's not something you're thinking about. I don't even know if thinking's the right word for it. And the passage of time, the way that we right now, you and I, we're aware of what time it is. We're aware of what we're in different time zones. We're in different parts of the day, but we're aware of the passage of time. 30 seconds to you is probably about 30 seconds to me, or close. Boy, is that not true. You know, um, and when you experience that, I guess it's one thing to experience it through psychedelics, which a lot of people have done. I've done. To experience it in a just, you don't know what's going to happen kind of way, and a lot of times that, you think something happens to you and it's going to be your time. You think that's going to be very scary. Just what I'm describing right now, like, oh, the concept of really coming close to that moment of taking that final breath, whatever. It actually feels like it actually seems like you're taking that final breath, but you get to take a new breath of different, clean air that you just couldn't imagine. And I always want to stress that it's not something that I look forward to ever doing again. It's just something that makes me live my life in a way that I'm unafraid, and something that has, pulled me back and forth between self-reflection, protection, and also given me a little bit of caution, to the ability to throw caution to the wind, a little bit of healthy recklessness, which I think is not something I hear people speak on a lot, but I think a little bit of healthy recklessness is kind of not a terrible thing these days. We're all very, I've been doing a lot of traveling, a lot of on the whim kind of last minute kind of stuff around the world, just kind of doing what I can to, make sure I, stay busy, stay contributive and things like that, but also experience a lot. And what that's done for me over the past few months has made me think like, wow, like I just sitting around at home in America, I even myself, I don't consider myself somebody who like struggles with anxiety or anything like that at the moment, but that kind of stuff just goes out the window when I am doing, I'm just going on pure instinct. I guess I always use the metaphor, you go down a water slide and imagine you're going down a water slide and there's handles on the inside. And you start going really fast and you might think, okay, yeah, you want to try to grab those things to slow yourself down a little bit. If it's getting scary, you're going to go too fast. You're not sure what's going to happen. You've never been this fast before. Don't grab the handles on the inside of the water slide. Just don't. It's really what it's taught me to have brushes with the other side and to have times where I didn't trust people because that's what happened. Has ultimately put me in a place where I can flow down the water slide without grabbing the handles. And I'm so grateful for it because I feel alive, but I feel just protected enough and guided enough to know that there's something greater out there than myself. And the perfect balance between what like to call healthy recklessness and, you know, um, protection, self-protection, self-love, self-exploration.
Did you ever encounter beings on the other side, whether they were
Um,
family members or light beings or anything?
it's interesting. In a sense, yes, and it's hard to call them beings. What I've had this conversation back and forth in my head, and both of my parents, they're gone. I've lost both my parents. My mother died early this year, and my father passed when I was 12 years old. So I have that relationship, close relationship with two people who one would normally kind of see in those situations. Um, And what I'd like to say on that is, yes, I have had the experience of feeling the energy of my father, feeling that energy that somebody was there. Now that wasn't like shaking his hand or looking at him when he was 30 years old in his happiest or whatever. Nothing like that. But even, only having my father till I was 12 years old, I still very much remember his energy. It's not something that will ever leave my memory. It's not something that I'll ever forget. I don't think he had a huge impact on my life. He was very present in my life until he wasn't. And it was my formative years. I mean, I think those childhood years are a little more, we're kind of a little more of a sponge than we are when we get a little bit older. We're adults for a lot longer than we're children. And he was there the whole time I was a child. And the few times that I've came through those types of experiences, I've felt the energy, the absolute omnipresence of my father, and then also very quickly a push away, as if to say no, to see no, no, that's something which I found interesting because like I've said, I've explored ayahuasca, I've explored 5-MeO, DMT, and I do a lot of breath work and meditation and things like that, where I actually recently did a little like a hike in the forest here in Europe, transcendental meditation, where you really kind of start to have endogenous, DMT type experiences during these trance states. I don't channel during trance states or anything like that. It's not something that I'm in a contest to do. It's just transcendental meditation has become a huge part of my life, and those um, those things that I've seen in those states, the ayahuasca ceremonies, the really really intense meditations where you put your body through a lot, extreme cold, extreme exposure, extreme hunger, extreme whatever. There's all sorts of things people put them, forms of just deprivation, things of forms of fasting, etc. All those things. Um, It's interesting. I've found that you can. I've had, and I'm kind of downplaying NDEs in this a little bit. I've almost had more contact with entities, so to speak, and beings, and I don't want to say more. I want to say clearer contact than during near-death experiences. Now, during the NDEs, like I said, it was always something where I felt that very familiar energy. I got to mingle with it for a moment, or what's sometimes seemed like a moment and sometimes seemed like a many, 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 many moments. Then there's that push away, which I'm still here, so I don't know what it feels like to really, you know, permanently stay on that other side. But yeah, that push away is something there. And again, so what I'm leading to here is this back and forth with these different methods of having these somewhat out of body, somewhat supernatural experiences, somewhat supernatural, psychedelic, whatever you want to call them, extraterrestrial, which and I am a practitioner of, and I'll throw this in there, a practitioner of certain things like the CE5 protocols and other meditation protocols alike. I can legitimately say, without believing that I sound crazy or anything like that, that I've had contact during those types of situations. Now, I don't mean like hanging out with a tall white or a gray or anything like that. I just mean conscious contact with something not of this dimension, this realm, this plane, whatever you want to label. We're all calling it something. We're talking about the same thing.
So when you say contact, are
Um,
you seeing UFOs in the sky during a
yeah,
CE5, or are you having some kind of
yes.
telepathic communication?
So, you know, unidentified UFOs in the sky. But what is a little bit more interesting about it, and I guess what makes it a true CE5 is feeling as if you do have some sort of that telepathic connection, even if, like I said, you're not holding hands with something in your bedroom, you're not being wrapped around by a light being. Like we've seen extraordinary stories and examples of these things. But just to feel as if you are, even for example, to say, come back out loud, but when you have a sighting and you have a feeling and you're wrapped in, and it's almost like a tunnel thought vision, like your thoughts go into a tunnel and you again, it's something that it's that theme again. Is it a moment or is it many, many, many moments? It doesn't matter. That goes away at that time, at least in my experience. And there is a conscious contact. There's something there that's a little outside of the norm, a little bit outside of what we're used to as communication between two human beings, where you feel as if something is at least with you. Now, I've not been exploring these things in extreme depth for decades, like some have. So, those are the people that I shoot to learn from, and I think it's important that we have, peers and people we learn from, and people that learn from us. I mean, it's great to have all those kind of things in our life. Um, I, I've never been to the point where I've had, conscious, full-blown contact and conversation, but I can confidently say that I've felt that, yes, I guess, for lack of a better word, conscious, telepathic connection with it. Not so much communication, just connection when you have a sighting, something like that during a CE5 protocol event. And that was, in my case, and that was a CE5 protocol event, So, of course, we got to shout out Stephen Greer for those. I know there's a plenty other of ways that people have spun off, actually consciously attempting contact, but that was the way that I was exposed to those protocols. I'm also somebody who was already practicing, transcendental meditation, which that is very much in tune with the CE5 protocols of Stephen Greer. So it was just kind of a little tweak on those meditations, and especially when you're in, even a small group, those kind of things really, really do happen. And I did have the pleasure of having one of those with like a couple of complete total non-believers once. And I got to watch them just almost shake and cry, not with sadness, but just what is happening. And it's just those little nudges all along the way that just make me keep my faith in these kind of things, that make me feel like you're not crazy if you talk about that. These things need to be talked about. There's people out there that that reach out to me that they've had half the experience that some of the people on your show have, extraordinary, and they still feel that as if they told anybody about it, they would feel insane. They think that if they, talk to anybody about this, they just can't. And that's clearly becoming not the case any longer. And that's shows such as yours. I mean, which congratulations, by the way, on your success.
Thank you.
I think that's beautiful that these kind of things are becoming less taboo to talk about because not because of the sensationalism and the kind of, the fad aspect of the whole spirituality thing that comes along with any kind of movement, but the dialogue, the loneliness that goes away when people realize that there's other people out there like them having these experiences, whether they're very similar or kind of similar, drastically different, they're not alone. And whether that means has a larger meaning of, extra dimensionals and extraterrestrials, or just other humans with souls having an experience that's a little atypical of what the perfect kind of, leave it to beaver middle America thing that we were just kind of taught to believe in. Not everybody's experiencing that. Some people are experiencing magic. And well, I think that's important that we talk about that, because if we're experiencing magic as a whole, as a collective, then that's what really gives me hope for us. That's what really gives me hope for the quote unquote light side, the good. Um, you know,
Well, how are you inspired by your experiences?
I guess, going back to being less afraid to explore while still having a little bit of a shield up, and talking about these things, not in a gratuitous way, but talking about, because I used to be somebody who was, like I told you, when I was younger, and this was after that first time when I was 15 and I kind of had that experience. Yeah, I was always just somebody who played music. That was something else. Two separate activities. I played the guitar, I played bass, I played string instruments, I wrote songs. I always did that. And very synchronously after that happened, after the first time that I came close with the other side, I kind of retreated into myself. But what I did was I retreated into myself in art. And I started, what did I was alone a lot. I didn't do a lot of the same things that I had always done. And I started playing music a lot more. I started writing music. I started playing music with other people because I started spending time with different kinds of people. And I mean, that honestly, fast forward just 2 years after that, all of a sudden I'm starting to play on stage and starting to get paid to play and starting to go, fly on and play with people that have asked me to fly out and play. And that's when I started doing, some session work and some tour work and everything like that. That's kind of where I kind of fell my niche when I was in my late teens, early 20s, was as kind of a recording and session guitar player. Writing a little bit of music and things like that for other like acts, which is something that's very prevalent in the music industry. It's not uncommon at all. Little things like that. That's the first example there. That time when I was 15 years old, what I was doing was what I thought I one needed to do to kind of get by and sustain, a certain image and a certain lifestyle that I thought was protecting me. And then I will, in an instant realize that that was not the case. And retreated into, self-discovery and things like that, which I now know was the beginning of, seeking spirituality from a standpoint that wasn't given to me by my family or my community or anything like that, but it was something that I found on my own. Whether it was through somewhat what I saw to be negative events at the time or not, it led me to move out of my shell in a different way and blossom as as a musician, which, of course, consequently led to other kind of crazy scenarios. We were talking about this a little bit earlier before, but when I was going back and forth around the United States playing music, I did start to kind of get into that weird Hollywood world where you start to wonder what's really going on behind certain closed doors. And I mean, of course, if anybody who watches the news and if anybody who scrolls Instagram or YouTube or anything these days knows that there's a little shadiness going on in the music industry. We'll just leave it at that. Um, the other thing, substance abuse is something that's absolutely rampant in that industry. And there's things that we hear about that are awful. There's a lot of awful aspects of certain businesses and certain pieces of the entertainment business. But and this is not to be a cop out, but substance abuse was always, and probably still to a degree, somewhat is rather accepted and brushed under the rug in that business. At least it was for me. Now, these days, I look at things as they happen for 100% total reason. I had something happen recently it wasn't a near to the other side experience, but it could have, I had a situation where I had an accident and I ended up finding something much more serious during that accident. So while it's not an NDE, I guess I've developed this ability to look at things as if they're happening for a good reason, even if they're not necessarily good things. Like retreating into self and deciding to just, well, I guess I've got nothing to do but write songs and develop my craft a little bit better. And all of a sudden that turns into a music career. And then a music career turns into a habit, and a habit turns into a situation where that was a time where I actually so that was the second time that I had a near to the other side experience. An overdose, a fatal overdose. And, I want to say that this was the one of the three times that I'll speak on, I guess, or that I've experienced anyway. I don't know if we're gonna speak on all of them or not, but that I didn't have necessarily that same level of beauty of coming out of the water that I spoke on earlier. Now, it wasn't that there was that there was any kind of darkness or anything to that. It wasn't the opposite. It wasn't like one was heaven and the other was hell. It was just There was just this feeling of, again, no time, no body, but almost nothing. Like for Christians out there who are familiar with the concept of purgatory, where there's just nothing. I guess that's how I understand it. Um, just nothing. And what I took that to mean was that what I was doing was something very, not saying that partying or using substances or whatever people choose to use. And I think it's really more about energy and intention. I don't think it's about whatever one is choosing to spend their time doing at whatever stage they're at in their life. I'm not here to judge that. I'm talking about myself and saying that what I was doing at that time was out of a low vibrational state, out of a very low energy state, a negative energy state. And I think crossing through the other side to the other side theory. I mean, and actually this time, like I think, I don't know if I mentioned this, it was declared to doctors kind of, you get lucky. It's funny that you can get lucky where maybe there's a paramedic who will try one more time. And that's the only reason that you're here. Those things started to mean things to me each time this happened. And even though, an overdose where you cross through the other side and you're a little disappointed because you're not afraid of death, but this is just black. This is nothing. It's not fire and brimstone, but it's not that beautiful blue lagoon that I saw before.
It sounds like to me
Um,
that you went to what we commonly call the black void.
Something, and I don't like to bring labels into these things on my own because if people want to make those connections when I'm telling us my truth, bravo, I love it. I appreciate, and that's great. I just don't like to introduce those labels and things like that because I don't want to tell people that what if they're having a common experience, if they've shared an experience that maybe they're wondering if they should even talk about, if it's worth talking about. And I'll say why it's worth talking about in a moment. I want them to formulate those things on their own. And if they associate them with a certain idea like the black void or liminal spaces or purgatory or whatever it is to them, I don't want to be the one who taught them what it was. I want them to derive their own meaning out of this. And where I'm getting at is the reason I'm sharing these kind of things. It's not like the only thing I ever speak about publicly is near-death experiences, but it's something that I have experience on that has been very, very profound to me. So it's valid in sharing because, like I said, and I'll say it again, like anything, there's other people out there having this other people, souls, beings, human avatars and meat suits, whatever you want to call them, having common thoughts, feelings, and experiences. But not everybody is having as comfortable a time with those thoughts, feelings, and experiences as everybody else. We're not all at the same. It's not about levels. It's not a contest. We're just not all at the same place. It's just the way it is. And the only way I really truly believe we're at it. I don't know if it's an ascension lifetime. I don't know if in my lifetime that it's not. I don't like to make these kind of bold claims. I don't know that the entire humanity, the entirety of the superorganism of Earth is ascending at this time. Like some people have spoken on, a lot of people speak on. There's obviously this large movement of spiritual awakening, which I'm very much involved in, and I very much consider myself on the path of. Um, I don't like to buy into anything too much 100%. I like to keep things open to my experience and how things are going in the moment. I don't know if we're on that ascension path where we all ascend sometime in the next year or two, or if it's in a metaphorical 100 years, or if it's something that's already happening on a quantum level. I'm very open to that, but what I'm certain of, and I guess like more closed-minded on, is that I know there's always people that I can go to for guidance as long as I trust that there's people like willing to share these kinds of things. And I've been affirmed that there's always people that are happy and, yeah, if not happy, relieved to hear these kinds of things from someone else because I mean, I get those messages, I get those emails, I get those whatever, the reach outs where oh, I felt that too, or whatever it is. I mean, I guess with a little bit of experience and a little bit of developed spirituality and a little bit of ability to have that perspective, have that wider lens. I don't want to say comes with responsibility, but it certainly comes with the opportunity to rise to the occasion. And honestly, that keeps me going a lot more than any kind of 3D money kind of situation. I've had a lot of different careers, a lot of different successful endeavors in my life, and nothing has ever felt so important to me as getting those votes of confidence from the message from the 17-year-old's mother that says my son loves listening to whatever your stories, or my son read your this, my son read your that, my son saw your this, and he's doing better now. Like those kind of things are what and that's what started happening to me when I started sharing these things unabashedly, unafraid. No reason. I can't see any reason to stop um, trying to at least help people who might have been where I have been, because I know that I certainly lean on people that have been where maybe I'm starting to feel like I'm going through at a certain point in life. There's people that I lean on. So I just feel like that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be that position wherever we are in that. I don't like the term hierarchy, but wherever we are in this place that we call Earth, the Earth game, we should all play our part in there. We all have a place in quote unquote the new Earth. I think the most powerful thing about the best thing you can do is be honest, share your experience, be authentic to yourself, keep seeking self, and I mean, it's working for me. I've never been quite so happy and quite so fulfilled. I've had vice president titles and corporate settings and things like that. That came later in life. But in the past few years, what I've really done is just I literally left the last corporate job I had to, and I told who's now my ex-wife at the time, I need more time to meditate. And that didn't go over crazy well. But that's the kind of faith that I've developed, which has become exponential over the years in, I guess, what's ultimately seeking self. And a lot of that's meditation and things like that. But it doesn't have to be meditation. It doesn't have to be yoga. It doesn't have to be any particular discipline. Knowing thyself, seeking self, sometimes serving self, because until a self unfulfilled is a self that cannot help anybody else. A self unfulfilled is often a self that abuses others and finds themselves in a situation where they take advantage of others. I was once like that. I find the more that I'm fulfilled, the more that I discover, the more that I seek inward, the better person I'm able to become. What I mean by that is the less negative net affect I have on my fellow soul, which is what matters. And, and it's easy to get lost in that these days. So for those reasons, I feel actually really thankful to have had experiences where, you take something and it nearly kills you, or when somebody wants to get a little bit of credit on the quote unquote the streets, so they try to take your life. Thank you. Thank all of you.
Well, you've had these esoteric experiences and synchronicities. How do you trust them that they are real and not just a coincidence?
Of course, there's definitely times in my life where I'm wondering, like, why did I leave my career? And then, there's times where it's, I guess, and I tend to speak in analogy and metaphor a lot, but there's times where you're really on a roll, you're on a hitting streak, and then there's times where things aren't really going so well, and you're maybe not experiencing the same type of synchronicities and things that are giving you that constant validation. And of course, that's when you even start to doubt yourself, like, and wonder, am I just crazy? Are these things coincidences? Why do I have such faith in concepts that I really can't see and I can't prove with data? They're true to me right in the time, and they're true for some time where they have effect. But of course, yeah, there's times where doubt creeps in. Now, for me, and I can only speak for myself, but some things that have happened for me, like recently, whenever those things start to happen and doubt creeps in, the universe, God, Quana, Vishnu, Prana, whatever we call it, source, everybody's talking. I want to harp on this. I think we're all talking about the same thing and call it something different. We're not. We're talking about the same thing. Um, Chimes in really, really hard. And when I say really, really hard, I'll give two examples that are things that have happened to me recently. As I said, my mother passed away early this year. I was really close to her. I, I grew up with my dad died young. I was close to my mother. I love my mother. Shout out to Lori Turgeon, rest in peace. But losing her earlier this year was obviously something that was hard. I mean, it wasn't fun. She actually passed. I was holding her hand when she passed. She took her last breath. It wasn't easy. It was something that she was sick. Stood by her to the end. It was beautiful. It was both beautiful, and it was also some of what, in the human 3D world we call kind of ugly. It wasn't it, you know, chronic disease, cancer, things like that are not always inherently beautiful. Um, During that time, of course, you lose people, and I'll throw in. So I had kind of a crazy year. I lost my mom in April, and I got divorced in June. So it was kind of a crazy year for me. And of course, now I'm thinking. It's funny now. I just had this thought. I felt like when I just said that, it was 5 years ago. No, it was like 6 months ago. Not even. I have had the most synchronous, most amazing year, spiritually speaking and experience-wise. I haven't had any brushes with the veil or the other side this year. Thankfully, I've been kind of okay. But of course, yeah, there was a time when I was this past spring when I was watching my mother decline, when I was watching my marriage decline of quite a long time. There was times where I had doubts, and of course, I was going. There's and when you have those kind of doubts, everything's kind of a domino effect. And there was times where I went a little bit dark in my brain and maybe not as reliant on the spiritual path and just blind faith that I've kind of developed the ability to just keep on at all times. I mean, I think if I just want to point out one low point, it's when I was losing somebody really close to me and losing somebody really close to me, both two people at the same time. It was just it was one of those years, man. But what started happening was, and this was something that, through the Immersive Podcast, which is the show that myself and my partner Jane do, the podcast. I've spoken to a lot of mediums and practitioners of QHHT, healers, different things like that, all sorts of different disciplines, channelers. And I've always kept an open mind, and I've never, you know, fallen hook, line, or sinker for any particular discipline or for any particular thing. I'd not had any, because, when I started the Immersive Podcast, my mother was still alive and my wife was still my wife. Um, these, um, these were the types of people that I was speaking to, and it was always just very interesting. And sometimes it was touching. It was an experience. Um, I guess what started to happen after that was in between just and I want to point out just a really small period of anger and doubt and things like that due to, life structure, 3D type circumstances. Um, what happened, I had a session with a medium, and her name is Sue Masari. She's the husband of a guy named Tom Masari, who is he's he's a channeler, and he's taught some I don't want to name drop anybody because I don't want to make any conflicts of interest, but he's taught some of the top
Hmm.
channelers in the world today
Yeah, I've had him
that
as
are
a
out there
guest.
today. Oh, you've had, okay, yes.
Tom, yeah, not his
So,
wife.
okay, so yes, Tom's wife is a very talented medium. And I had a session with her. And, without sounding too corny or anything like that, just there was things that she said in that session that had to do with my mother, which was funny because she freely admitted to knowing a fair bit about me. She told everything she knew about me, which I was surprised she knew that much about me, which, seen these types of people before. That immediately established a lot of legitimacy with me because she kind of she spent the whole first part of the session laying out everything that she already knew and how and why she didn't want me to think that she didn't want me to think that she saw this on YouTube somewhere and then was saying it to me. Like she was just trying to establish a rapport and legitimacy. So that first started off the session really well. Then she started to tell me things about my mother, that there's things that had happened in the years prior. The session was just extremely powerful. She got sick during the session. My mother had cancer. There were certain phrases that she would say to me that weren't things I would ever say in public. That were things that, my mother had said to me when I was a child. And then there was one thing where, actually towards the end of my mother's life, and this is just kind of a random little factoid, but we used to get a lot of offers from like the Hard Rock Tampa, free cruises, things like that. I'm from Tampa, Florida. That's where I live. I'm just in Europe right now. I'm not from Paris or Germany or any of those places. Just hanging out in Europe. But we used to get a lot of free gifts and offers from the Hard Rock Casino in Tampa. Two reasons. I used to play a lot of shows there, just cover shows and things like that. And, we used to go, my mother liked to, play some casino games. So, they offer you things to get you in there. And they were offering cruise tickets all the time, cruise ship tickets, to go on a cruise. And that was something towards the end of her life. And I was kind of suggesting it, like, Matt, why don't we go on a cruise? Why don't you go on a cruise? You've never been out of the country. You've never been here. You've never been here. And she was vehemently against it. And then Sumasari, at middle of the session, looked, it's almost like I saw a wave of energy tap her on the shoulder, which was weird because she kind of did one of these, like a mid-sentence, like, what? And she looked me right in the eye and she said, she told me to tell you that she goes on cruises now. This is an example of one of the more powerful things she said during that session. Now, after that session, a lot of really weird things happened because this was a time when I was doubting things, and I was actually I was in New England at the time, New Hampshire, Massachusetts area of the United States. And my father had a house up there, this is another story, but I had never been able to find my father's house. He passed when I was so young. My father and my mother weren't married. They didn't live in the same place. I could never find my father's house. I didn't know where it was. um, I found it very, very quickly after that session. I was driving and I found it. And I also found it. And I got a phone call from someone who was very close to my father that I hadn't spoken to in like 15 years, right when I was right there by my father's house. Just little synchronicities, little things like that that kind of nudged me along. Um, but it gets a little better. I've seen two more mediums this year since that first one, since Sue. And I mean, Sue's amazing, but no offense to Sue. I do a podcast where I speak to mediums and I go to places like Glastonbury, England, where there's wizards and mediums walking around. So, it's not weird for me to run into a medium here and there. I've had two other mediums. What was it? November? My mother passed in April. So I've had three mediums tell me that phrase, Jeff. Your mom tells me to go tell you she goes on cruises now. Three in three different countries. One in Massachusetts, one in England, and one in, is it Germany? How many people I don't know if these people are hanging out with each other and talking about my life and watching me and my mother's secretly in private talk about potentially going on a cruise 2 years ago. But in a year when you're doubting your spirituality, in a year that you're doubting the magic that could be out there, and then, so one was Sumasari, very esteemed medium, who told me this. Another was the man who works at the Travel Lodge in Glastonbury, England. I was there for a festival. And he was just a guy who works at the Travel Lodge. He said, I'm clairvoyant, I'm medium, and I need to talk to you. And I was with others. He said, he needs to talk to me. And he let the others listen. He said that phrase. Same thing. What? Does it mean anything to you, Tyler? She says, tells she goes on cruises now. And it happens again. Like, do you need three times to have those little nudges that seem to come when you have the reasons that to me, whatever at the time, to doubt. Those nudges always come in. And I guess I always just have the faith now. And now I'm at the point, I'm 32 years old. I've lived a successful career as an artist where I could have kind of gone further, but it was compromising my morals. I lived a career kind of on the other side of the law where yeah, also very successful in that sense, but I paid for those things. I got into some very shady situations. I almost lost my life. I almost lost my freedom. And I've worked very hard to get rid of those things and not be, I'm somebody who can still vote. I can still vote in the election. That's not me anymore. It's really not me anymore. I've changed my life. I had a phase of my life where I went and worked kind of in that corporate America world. I was an interior designer, which was still kind of art to me. It was kind of settling as a real job where I still got to do what I consider to be something artistic and creative. Um, I was very close to the top of a very successful, interior design firm. And then I left that. And here we are now. And I've never had, well, there's more faith that whatever's going to happen next is going to be just beautiful. And the people that I meet along the way, the people, the stories, the connections, the human connections, and even the occasional brush with the other side, they're all beautiful. And the most recent thing that's happened to me was, and this is almost like the stamp of approval on this kind of thing. And a lot of people have in my circle are going to be like, oh, he's actually talking about this. So the reason I didn't go, I'm on this trip in Europe. I'm doing conferences and events and things like that. Whether I'm speaking at them, hosting them, or just there to film and participate, it's kind of a big array of the few. So, shout out to Portal to Ascension. They've thrown a lot of really cool events over here in England. And, the All Shift Happily Now crew, all those people from Gaia, I didn't get to attend their event because what happened was I came into Germany. And the very first day I got to Germany, first time in Germany in my life, this was about 3 weeks ago, it was the morning of the All Shift Happily Now conference in Germany. I was actually very excited to go to it. I was going to be a part of it, and I was just going to be there, and it was going to be amazing. I was excited. It was the next step in my little trip around Europe. So silly. In this, I'm not going to use this excuse, but German European showers, they're different than ones we have in America. So where you might be used to a sliding door, maybe there's a hinge there or whatever, something like that. It's very early in the morning. I wasn't partying or it was just very early in the morning. I was in a very large German shower and I fell. I had broken, this is a new nose here, brand new. I split this open. My nose went completely sideways. I broke it so badly. I fell from standing height in the tub. It actually broke the tub. I've never seen porcelain break like that, like chip from a person. It's kind of weird. And I- there was no time sitting there thinking like, no, no. I had a huge smile on my face. I knew something was good about this, and there was nothing earthly good about it at the moment. I was really mangled. I was not in a good situation. I just got into a country where I don't speak the language. I've never been there before. And I'm supposed to be going to something to see my friends and have an event and participate in things that are both spiritually enriching to me and fun. You know, I'm not getting to do that. I'm calling 911, so I have to go deal with this. My face is not the same as it normally looks. Broken. But I'm smiling, and these paramedics are, kind of why I guess I have this complex because what are you, like under the influence or something? 'Cause I'm laughing and giggling and smiling at their questions and just being generally upbeat about this whole thing. Why are you so happy? Because I'm not in pain, and I don't know, something good's going to come of this. I actually found that there was something a little more serious when I got to the hospital. There was like I guess they would call a bleed, or sometimes it's called an aneurysm, or sometimes it's like a cerebral hemorrhage. There was something that was at risk that was not related to this fall there that would not have otherwise been, even thought of, let alone discovered. It was just not a thing. Is that, well, Dusseldorf's going crazy tonight. It was just not a thing that I would have checked up on. And honestly, it was something that could have been very serious. I don't want to say, oh, it was 100% going to be fatal or anything, but doctors were quite concerned because I fly a lot, and my next flight was going to be back to the United States. So it was going to be not just that typical 45-minute, 1 hour flight from England to Ireland to Germany that I've been doing. It's going to be a normal flight, like us Americans are used to, normal length flights. They were not of the opinion that that was something that was safe for this condition, that it was very likely going to, you know, burst kind of thing. So basically, falling in the shower and breaking my nose, and the last 3 weeks I've been wearing cast up my nostrils, and I had a cast over it, and had stitches. I just got all this taken out the other day. If I didn't fall in the shower, then obviously I very likely wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here in Germany. I've had a great time in Germany, by the way. It's been awesome. It's been really great country. I've got to go to the Netherlands. I went to Belgium. I'm going to Paris tomorrow. I've met some really amazing people here that I didn't ever think I would meet in some very weird ways. Just random two people alone on a train kind of thing. It's been an amazing few weeks. It's been I saw an outpour of support and love from my friends when that accident happened. Even though, I mean, of course, yeah, I was going through some things. It wasn't free to have, a surgery in a foreign country or anything like that. But I good things came of this. It's just to your question at the beginning, after I've been rambling for so long, Jeff, was how do I keep going? How do I know what keeps my faith? How do I know these things aren't just coincidences? Because if I could fall in the shower and watch my beautiful nose go all the way, you ever touch the front of your nose to your cheek? Not comfortable. If I can sit there and watch that happen to me and look in the mirror with a huge smile and the excitement of a little puppy dog, I can't wait to see what this is going to be. What's going to come of this? Even if we're doctors and they're looking at me insane, like, what is this crazy American doing here? Yeah, I might be a crazy American. I get that response, and I've been in Europe for a while, and it's kind of true. I'm sometimes the crazy loud American, and it's fine. I like to live. I like to laugh. I like to talk. I like to explore. If I can sit there and be that happy over something like that, and wait through it, and get you know, get the treatment and get the surgery. And by the way, I had surgery. I had to spend a few nights in a German hospital. Mentioned before that I've had a substance abuse problem in the past, so I didn't take any painkillers or anything like that. It was kind of a rough experience. All that came from it was a deep blind faith that it was going to be for a good reason, and everything is fine now. Schoen Clinic, Germany. I'm healthy. I'm fine. I can fly. It's good. Um,
It's great.
I've met people that I know I'll work with again. I met people that I know I will spend time with again. I'll meet again. I've never seen Paris before. I'm gonna go see that tomorrow. That's what keeps me from thinking these things are coincidences. I just allow a little bit of time in between,
Well, you're a
the time
podcast.
for me to think there's any doubt. Sorry about that.
It's
Yeah.
all right. Your podcast is called the Immersion Podcast.
So there is a podcast called that. I'll be clear. It's called the Immersive
Oh,
Podcast. And
Immersive
yeah, the logo.
Podcast.
Yeah, the logo looks like
Yeah,
like this right here.
looks great.
A little
If
self-promotion.
if people want to find out more about it, where do they watch it or listen to it?
So the Immersive Podcast is on, we do post on Instagram and the socials, but we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Pandora still think all the places where podcasts are typically a thing. Obviously, YouTube is kind of the main spot because that's where the video is. But just audios are up on all the podcast platforms. And shout out to my partner Jane. You can find us both on Instagram. That's where you're going to kind of see what we're up to the most. That and obviously the YouTube for the podcast, just the Immersive Podcast. Um, our Instagrams are where we keep things up. Jane's the producer, and I'm the typical on camera. And it's something that's kind of new, and it's something we started a few months ago. We've got a lot of really great friends, colleagues, and just people that we've met that we've been lucky to be able to work with over the past few months, and we're starting to have some really, really interesting conversations with some really cool guests. So feel free to check it out.
That's
At
great.
least I'm there.
How often are you creating content and publishing it?
So I try to release 2 episodes a week. And I did kind of, of course, I had the episode with the surgery and everything like that. So I think we might have fallen behind a little bit there past month, but we are happily scheduled now, and we'll be back on that 2 episode a week played. So that's positive. Absolutely.
Well, if people want to reach out to you and ask you questions, are you open to that? And if so, how do they contact you?
Always open to it. I'm probably a little guilty to those close to me that I have obligations to for spending a little, not guilty. I spend a lot of time answering those kind of things, and I'm happy to, and it's what kind of keeps me, I connected. Just happy because I talk to people like that too. I'm not ashamed to admit that I reach out. And the place you can probably reach me the easiest is Instagram, and it's just at Tivador, Tivador. It's my first name Tyler, my last name is Tivador, so Tivador. It's got the little thing. I answer the messages. You can reach me there. Absolutely.
Tyler, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Absolutely. Magic is real. And to me, magic's real. And the only time I begin to allow the negative and the low frequency feelings and situations that we talk about in this quote unquote spiritual community, the only time those negative frequencies and emotions come into my life is when I begin to doubt that magic is real. Don't don't doubt that magic is real. Don't ever stop believing in the magic. That's all I would say. Even in the darkest of times, there's going to be a little bit of light. And yeah, I'll speak in one more metaphor. If I shut all the lights off in this room, but I leave one on in the closet, and I just crack the door a little bit, it lights up this room. There's no less light in there. Just believe in that. Believe in magic. Get through those moments where there's a little bit, maybe you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet. Just believe that it's there. It is. Magic's real. Whatever that means to you, whatever phase you're at.
Tyler, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me. I genuinely appreciate it. Went by quick. It was great talking to you. And yeah, thank you for having me, everybody. I appreciate you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.